Hey everybody, it's the Salt City Hoops podcast. We've got World Cup soccer going on. It's Juneteenth. That means the draft is just a few days away. And that also means we're getting closer to some other decisions that the Jazz are going to make that Mark Pereira and I are going to talk about tonight on this Salt City Hoops podcast. Mark has already gone the distance with some other people, talked draft and Walker Kessler the other day with Ken. He's had Riley Gissaman on. He's gone solo a couple of times. Tonight, the assignment at hand is we're going to talk about maybe we're going to skip ahead a little bit. We know the draft is days away, but right after that comes free agency, and the Jazz have one pretty big tool they can use to think about free agency or some other ways they can acquire players in, and that's the mid-level exception. And Mark and I are going to tackle that and see what we can figure out along the way about Keyonte George. Some noise about his possible extension. He's extension eligible in 11 days from the time of this recording, something less than that from the time of your listening. So we're going to dive into all of that. Mark, how the heck are you?
I am fabulous. I'm really excited to talk about this because this is the type of thing that I've been a dork about since way too early that I'm embarrassed to admit how young I was when I start thinking about team building, and because you could do franchise mode in 2K and Madden and everything, and the idea of bringing guys in, making your team better is for the first time in 5 years for the Jazz is a relevant thing. Sure, we've always wanted to bring in guys around the edges who can improve the team and make what the next playoff version of this team will be better, and discussing trades like how does Kelly Olynyk fit in the future? Not really. Those things don't matter. This is a time where I think we can finally look at this and say the Jazz have a lot of great players who are all going to be making a lot of money, but players, we've just watched a fabulous NBA play, one of my favorite NBA playoff series seasons that I can remember, and just littered with guys who matter. Not minimum guys. We certainly had a lot of minimum contributors in the playoffs and some really good teams, but a lot of these 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 million dollar players are so necessary to the performance of your team, not just regular season filler, like actual impact players. And Dan, where I'd love to start is just like why it's so important for the Jazz to acquire winning players right now. Maybe it's one guy with the mid-level exception, or maybe it's two guys, but I don't want the Jazz to just sit around and wait and leave that, and all of a sudden we're looking at the end of the year and it's just completely unused or used to take on salary dumps, either because you as a trade tool or as a signing tool. I want a useful player in the door now, because I think winning is really important right now. It's time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing. The Jazz are going to go into the season with a unique collection. I mean, we can snicker about the whole two timelines thing from Golden State, something that their owner famously said after the season, where Steph Curry broke his hand and they made some trades and they wound up with a kind of a mix of young and old. And it didn't really yield anything for them because in their case, the young guys were like James Wiseman and Jonathan Kuminga and whatever. But the Jazz are going to go into the season with here's what they've got. They're going to have two all-stars under 30 years old. Only 8 teams in the NBA can say that. The Jazz have Markkanen and Jackson, two bona fide all-stars, both on this side of their, not this side because I'm on the other side, but they're on the quote-unquote right side of 30. Only 8 teams can say that. They're also going to go into this season with 2 recent top 5 draft picks, Ace Bailey and whoever they pick next Tuesday night. Only 6 teams in the NBA can say that. There are only 3 teams that have both things going for them. That's Utah, Detroit, and San Antonio. And then in addition to that, the Jazz have 2 guys in Keyonte George and Walker Kessler. If they can patch things up with Walker Kessler, we won't dive into that too much tonight because you and Ken did a great job examining that. But that's 6 guys basically. And so when we talk about this mid-level exception, and when we talk about it in the context of the Jazz trying to win games next year, we're literally what we should be talking about here is the Jazz finding a guy who basically is going to be the 7th man on a playoff team. Maybe even more than that, because we don't know if, Darren Peterson, AJ Debonsa, Cam Boozer, for that matter, if Ace Bailey is really going to be like the fourth and fifth or the fifth and sixth most important players in a winning context on a winning playoff team. So really, if the Jazz use their MLE, especially if they use their full MLE on a guy, it kind of needs to be someone who you could picture being the sixth or seventh best player on a playoff roster. And that's a different assignment than just like, oh, let's see which transitory guys, which fungible assets come back in this trade that, some of them might be here through part of the rebuild and some of them we might flip immediately. Some of them might be Pat Bevs that immediately become Taylor Horton Tuckers. Some of them might be Kelly Olynyk's that stay here for a minute or Simone Fontecchios that stay here for a minute. Look at this. We're remembering guys. Mark always says we remember guys on the Salt City Hoops podcast. This doesn't even count as remembering a guy. Those guys were here like 5 minutes ago. But anyway, that's my long way of punctuating what you're saying, Mark, which is that this decision with how to use the MLE like actually matters.
And I think on the heels of the Rudy Donovan era, right, I think the Jazz had a number of tools and opportunities to bring in guys that didn't work. And that frustrated us for a couple years now. There were all sorts of reasons we can get into. Well, they couldn't use it this time, and here's how the salaries were structured, and well, we had O'Neal under this contract and Joe Ingles on this contract. And so, but with this era, we haven't had to see this team perform, so we don't have any sort of built-in defenses ready to say of like, well, here's why that didn't work, or here's why this didn't work. But the reason I'm so urgent about it, and let's get right into the meat of the guys here in a moment of like who we're excited about, is that there's no buildup anymore. The salaries are coming. Right. Walker Kessler is getting a new contract right now. Keyonte George is getting a new contract the next year, right? And Lauri Markkanen and Jaren Jackson are already $50 million players, and Ace Bailey and our number 2 pick, we'll see what they become, and their extensions are going to be a few years down the line. But by being early draft picks, they make a lot of money. Like they actually make like 8 figures on their contracts. So the Jazz have no more time to bring in players to improve their team. Next year, they will be at or above the luxury tax, regardless of who they sign this summer. So they won't really have this same tool next year. They'll have the taxpayer mid-level exception, which is a little bit less, but you only want to do that if you're really in dire straits and really want to bring in a guy. Anyways, this is the opportunity to actually improve the team that they won't have next year. And just because we haven't been used to watching Jazz winning basketball, this team is not meant to be a cute story to get the 8 seed. This team is built based on its quality and its salary structure to be an immediate home court advantage team. And if that sounds crazy to you, I'm telling you that if they don't get home court in the playoffs this year, based on the salaries on the team and based on the quality of the players, that's actually a disappointment. So raise your expectations, everybody. So I want to bring in a player right now that matters. The last thing, Dan, before I want you to kick us off with who your number 1 guy is that you'll be excited about to bring in, is we're doing this before the draft. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who we draft. I think almost all of the time, a rookie is going to be in their first year a net negative player. And yes, Darren Peterson and AJ Debonsa and Cam Boozer could probably not be any different from one another as far as the position they play on the court, right? That they all have perhaps some overlapping skills, but they're all different players. I don't think who we draft actually affects what options you look at for this mid-level exception tool. Maybe a little. I'm not dense to it. Like if you draft Cam Boozer, you're probably not looking at Bobby Portis as a guy to overlap there. I'm not that dense about it, but I'm also want to be cognizant of the fact that this rookie is not going to be incredibly valuable to winning basketball games this year. Hopefully they're a little valuable. You want them to be good right out of the gate, but I am more optimistic in their 2, 3, 4 years and beyond. And the mid-level exception is about what can you do for me now and next year?
Well, yeah, and on top of that, the Jazz just have a lot of multi-positional players. All these guys they're talking about drafting are to one degree or another multi-positional players. So I think I think it's okay on June 19th to imagine, who the Jazz might add without knowing who they're drafting, because guys can fit together in different ways. I think, back to the point we were making, like right now, and obviously the Jazz will sign a backup center whether that's Yusuf Nurkic or someone else. The Jazz will make a decision about Kevin Love. Like they'll do some of those things. But as of right now, the seventh best player on this playoff hopeful rotation is one of Isaiah Collier, Cody Williams, Bryce Sensabaugh, Kyle Filipowski. The Jazz also have a couple of more veteran types in John Konchar and Svi Mikhailuk. Like none of those guys, and I mean, I think you've been led on this a lot, Mark, this season, just saying that like as exciting as different guys have been at different things at different points in the year or their years with the Jazz, like none of those is a guy you want being the seventh guy on a playoff team yet, right? Like maybe that'll happen later. So for all those reasons, I think you're right. I think it's about figuring out a guy who brings the right stuff. And then now I'll be honest, like I haven't looked a lot at bigger bodies just because regardless of whether the Jazz draft Cam Boozer or not, I think it's going to be hard for a power forward type to find minutes on this team. Center's less so, but if Walker Kessler's going to cost, 28 million average annual value or more, I don't know that I want to spend the mid-level. I don't know that I want to spend the other biggest tool the Jazz have on a center necessarily. So I will be honest that I'm mostly focused on guards and wings. Should I just go for it? Should I give you my number one guy and we'll just launch into this thing?
Let's go. Who is the one player that you think, if they are on the Jazz in 26-27, will impact winning to a degree and maybe help swing a playoff series or two?
I don't know if this guy is really MLE level or if this is wishful thinking. My number one guy is Quentin Grimes. I know that you and Zarin and some other people are prioritizing, like, let's get a ball handling kind of table setting type in. And I get that. Part of the reason I like Grimes is because I think he's a little bit proven at doing like, not like running an offense, but doing like second side stuff. He can put the ball on the deck, usually attacking closeout, second side, second action, third action, that kind of thing. He had that weird half season with Philly where he averaged more than 20. That was a partial season after a trade. So put as much stock in that as you want. But even outside of that season, he's had a few different double-digit scoring seasons. I do think he's a plus defender. I don't think he's a lockdown guy, but I think he's a guy who has been around the league enough and is a tough enough defender that he will just kind of increase the Jazz's defensive street cred on the perimeter just enough. He's 6'4", which is kind of small for a guy who's really a 2-3 tweener. So like it's like if you have a guy who's a 2-3 hybrid, you'd like him to be 6'6" and not 6'4". Whatever. I think he uses his size well. I think he's interesting. He can shoot. I mean, he hasn't been a terribly consistent shooter, but he's had good seasons. He's never cracked 40, but he's 37% from his career for his career from three. This one maybe changes a little bit based on if the Jazz add AJ versus Darren Peterson versus Boozer. But frankly, I think I would add Quentin Grimes in any of those scenarios, because even if they have Peterson, who's going to have the ball in his hands a lot, you still need like a perimeter enforcer. And I think that's how I would define his defensive role. He's not like go out there and stop Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but I think he's just like not going to back down from anybody in a way. And so I like him. I can imagine him being, the guy who closes some fourth quarters in a playoff game because the Jazz are just not sure that they want to let Darren Peterson go toe-to-toe with Anthony Edwards in the second round.
I really like Quentin Grimes. I think he is a Svi Mikhailuk after a Mario mushroom. I think he's got all of the things that Mikhailuk does, but just like a little bit better. Mikhailuk maybe is a little bit better of a shooter, but like there's definitely some ball in hand stuff that Quentin Grimes does. I think the frustrating thing about Grimes is like I could definitely see him in a Jazz uniform and getting 30 minutes a night and people who watch the Jazz like sickos night after night are gonna point out like all the little things he does off the ball, and and he has like a really nice game, but he finishes a game with 6 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and we're all just like, the sickos are like, he really helped glue everything together, and then his averages look terrible. Maybe he's only shooting 34% from three, and you're looking to be like, we're paying $14 million a year for that. And I think that's sometimes the inconsistency can be frustrating with him, because sometimes he's not just like impacting the game. And in Philadelphia, when he got Edgecombe and Maxey and occasionally Embiid and occasionally Paul George with usages all in like 149,000% usage out of those four guys, sometimes Quentin Grimes isn't gonna like have big games. I'm saying this as a fantasy basketball dork who had Quentin Grimes, just being very frustrated that like I'd get 26 one night and then 2 the other night. It can be frustrating, but I think he is that connector type that would be effective. I absolutely think he would fit in at, I think he's gettable at $50 million starting salary this year. So to fit in the MLE, when you're saying like wishful thinking, where the Jazz might struggle is I'm not sure the Jazz are really in a financial position to offer a 3-4 year contract at the mid-level exception. And I think Quentin Grimes is not going to get more than the mid-level, but I think he's going to have offers from teams for a full 4 year or even 3 year mid-level, maybe even 3+1. And I'm not sure the Jazz, but again, Keyonte George and Kessler's extensions have now kicked in, and Ace Bailey in the 4th year, that his contract will be up. Like then you're into a situation of like every single dollar you're spending on the back end is perhaps not wise. So he's absolutely a glue guy, and he would have some great moments. And I think he would leave a lot of Jazz fans frustrated as to why he's in the month of February, he's only averaging 7 points. And you're like, this is crazy. How come he's playing over Bryce Sensabaugh? I'm like, because he's better.
Yeah, I mean that could happen. Although for what it's worth, it's been he's really only had, aside from his rookie season, he's only had 1 year where he averaged single digits. I think that's a valid. I'm not sure who's going to give him a 4-year MLE that has a chance to be as relevant as the Jazz. But I could picture someone giving him a 4-year MLE that maybe isn't as relevant, but because they're not as relevant, they're like, hey, you're going to play 32 minutes a night. Like, you're going to get a lot of shots off, as opposed to like, you're going to be the grown up in the room. And a lot of nights we're going to need you a lot, but some nights we're going to like, let Darren Peterson cook, let AJ DeBonta cook, let Ace Bailey cook. And so I think that's where you don't know kind of what he's valuing at this point in his career. Obviously, he did the rare thing last summer of gambling on himself, and he was in the Walker Kessler position, and he decided to take the 1-year QO so that he could, make his own destiny this offseason. I don't think guys don't do that unless they have like an irrational, but irrational in a healthy way, belief in what they are and what they could be. So, maybe that tells you that role is going to matter to him more than necessarily, the money, the years, if there's a team option or a player option on the back end, like whatever. But I like him for all the reasons I said. I also get the people who want like another guard, another actual facilitator. And I think your number one target kind of fits in that mold, right?
I want ball handling because I think I'm higher on Isaiah Collier than pretty much every Jazz fan I talk to, it feels like. I really think Isaiah Collier is pure backup point guard. He's going to have a 12-year NBA career backing up point guards for a long time and doing cool things. And his ceiling is still kind of undefined a little bit. I don't think he's got all-star ceiling or anything like that. But that being said, even if Darren Peterson is in the fold, the rest of the team can't dribble. We need more of it. I think any successful NBA offense, and Will Hardy's done magic with off-ball stuff, like he's a football coach, frankly. But every successful NBA offense that I watch has 2 to 2.5 capable dribblers at all times, and you don't want Lauri Markkanen doing that. Jaren Jackson has some weird ISO games, but it's not really doing dribbling and facilitating. It's more, hey, there's 10 seconds left on the clock. Can you get to that 12 to 8 foot floatery thing that you do? Walker Kessler certainly can't dribble. Darren Peterson will help. Great. He and Keyonte are going to be the two of, and then Isaiah Collier is not exactly a quality guy yet. So even if you have Darren Peterson and Keyonte George, you need another person who can actually dribble and facilitate, bring the ball up, get it you into your first action. Not second side attacking like Quentin Grimes, but hey, for 20 minutes a night, or to 24 minutes a night, this guy is facilitating our offense, but we don't have to rely on him. All these guys at the mid-level are going to have flaws. And so why DeAnthony Melton is my number one. His flaw is, I feel like Jonah Hill in Moneyball. His flaw is that he's always hurt.
Yeah.
And it's every time he's played minutes, he's been a metrics darling, and he looks good out there. He has fairly good size at the 1-2 guard, can play either one of them. And yeah, he's not some blazing pick and roll operator and super brainiac type of dude, but like he is a facilitator. He knows how to get into the paint. He's a good shooter. He's a defense. No matter how many injuries this dude has, still a great defender. At the point of attack, off ball, he gambles in smart ways. He will absolutely impact the team. And the reason I really, really, really like him as, okay, this guy's always injured, is if the Jazz can keep him on ice and treat him well in the regular season, get to the playoffs, and he's playing in these high leverage moments in the Alex Caruso type of injury management style, right? Budget Alex Caruso. And I want to get to the playoffs with budget Alex Caruso. And that's exactly what I think DeAnthony Melton does. He has a player option that is for very cheap, so he's certainly going to turn that down and look for more money elsewhere. Golden State would be interested in bringing him back, but they have significant financial issues. He's going to have many offers at the mid-level, and we will have a guaranteed role for him because we're going to say, dude, we need ball handling and we need what you can do. And if we don't draft Darren Peterson and it's AJ Debonce, we'll really need what he can do from a dribbling and shooting perspective.
Yeah. I like Melton too. I'm high on that idea. I do think, for the same reasons that I'm a little nervous going into a season, knowing that one of, Flip, Cody, Zay, Bryce is the seventh best player on a playoff team. I feel a little bit the same way about Melton. He's had exactly one season in his career when he averaged more than 18 minutes a game in the playoffs. So I just don't know that he's really ever been the seventh best guy on a playoff team. He by the way, also has never had a single season where he has shot at league average for true shooting. But I kind of don't care about that because the reason you have DeAnthony Melton is not because he's this offensive weapon. It's because he greases the wheels for everybody else and just makes your bench offense coherent. I guess that's a long way of saying, Mark, I like DeAnthony Melton. If I'm less convinced if he's like the one acquisition the Jazz make this summer, the one big acquisition other than the draft. I'm a little bit nervous of that because I'm still going into the season going, okay, but who's the sixth man in the playoffs kind of thing. And maybe that's Melton. He has had 3 really weird years, and obviously that coincides with his injuries. He was a really good player in Memphis and the start of his Philadelphia tenure, and then 38 games, 6 games, 49 games. His stats look bad those 3 years because again, it's hard to get any kind of rhythm when you're never playing more than a dozen games at a time, and then you're going out with another injury and whatever. And I don't blame the player on that. I'm not one of those people who think, I think fans should, for the most part, retire the words injury prone from their vocabularies. You and I do not know who is injury prone and who has just had shit luck. And so that kind of bothers me when fans hang that on a player. Side note, this has nothing to do with DeAnthony Melton. It's especially infuriating when in the discourse around like a Walker Kessler or a Lauri Markkanen, Jazz fans blame them for missing games in years when the team clearly wanted them to milk injuries and to take it slow. But that's another topic. Long way of saying I like DeAnthony Melton. I think I would like DeAnthony Melton more if he was like the 8th or 9th most important Jazz man in a playoff context, than if they were really expecting him to be the 6th or the 7th. But I'm not unexcited about that possibility.
Last thing I'll say on Melton, and then we'll do not rapid fire, but perhaps we've been kind of like debating these individual players, and from here we can just like players that we like without debating them too much. But I like this little back and forth. I'm like, I'm not so high on Grimes, and you're not so high on Melton, and they're our number one guys. I love it. I love it. My last thing on Melton is I've followed his whole career, the Houston, the Memphis, and everything, and Golden State here, right? It's the last 3 months of the Golden State season. They managed his minutes. They didn't have Steph Curry. He didn't play back-to-backs. And every time he played 25 minutes the last 3 months of the year when they just had no one on their roster, he was putting up huge numbers and looked like the best player on the entire Warriors team. Again, no Curry, no Draymond, no Jimmy Butler. But like they had some other good players. They had the Moses Moody before he went down. They had some other pretty solid players. And he looked really, really good. So I'm wondering, like, okay, so if we can put you on ice and put you in a specific role, are you actually, as your advanced metrics have always shown, that you are actually a special player that just needs to be really, really carefully managed? So I'm curious about that. I have so many other solid ideas and one very stupid, crazy idea that I can't wait to get to. So who is a guy that perhaps this doesn't blow the Jazz out of the water, but you're like, this guy will matter?
I mean, Zarin Ficklin, when he designed the free agency tool that we've talked a lot about on these podcasts, he was kind of demoing it for me, and his guy was Ayo Dosunmu, who I think would be a great fit in some of the same ways as Melton. Like he's an actual guard. He's probably closer to the Colin Sexton mold of guard, meaning just like I can break the paint whenever I want to, and then good things are going to happen because I broke the paint. My issue with Dosunmu is, the Wolves probably have to keep him. He's only coming off $7.5 million, but the Wolves probably have to give him a raise and keep him just because the Wolves are at a point with their team building where if he walks, they don't get to replace him with something, and it's better to keep an asset alive than to not. Another guy in that ilk, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this one. If the Jazz prioritized a bench playmaker, I don't know. Tell me what you think about Coby White. Coby White had a pretty good season from an advanced stats perspective. Charlotte went and got him from Chicago. So Charlotte wanted him. Charlotte traded Colin Sexton and some other stuff to get Coby White. Coby White actually kind of reminds me of Colin Sexton in some ways. Maybe not a pure point guard, but he's a ball handler and he's a creator and he just kind of does it in his way. Coming off $12.9 million, maybe costs the full mid-level, but I also don't know if Charlotte, having just acquired him a couple months ago, is going to feel like there's some sunk cost there, and they gotta try to keep him.
Yeah, the thing with Coby White is like he's finally gotten to a level in his career where he's like actually consistently impactful. So I really like that, and I really like the growth that he's shown after a lot of inconsistency. The problem is he's a North Carolina kid, born and raised. He went to the University of North Carolina. I think he can go to Charlotte and say like, just give me $1 million or $2 million above the mid-level and I'll come back. Like I don't think he's gonna fight too hard on that sort of thing. I would love him at the mid-level. I super just assume he's not gettable. I think Charlotte will offer him a price over the mid-level that we just can't get. A player that I think in that ilk who is worse than him, but I think whose brand is way further in the toilet than I think it needs to be. I don't think he's super great, but I think he would fit in for what the Jazz need. I like Anthony Simons at the mid-level. I'm not sure how long of a contract I would want to give him for. He's got his defensive issues. We certainly don't need more guys with defensive issues. But again, at the mid-level, you're going to get guys with flaws, and you can go on the other. There are some defense-first guys we can talk about in a moment. But this team also needs guard shooting. And he provides a lot of that. If we bring back Nurkic, Anthony Simons and Nurkic are also good friends from their time in Portland. They had a pretty good little, have a good little bench two-man game. Bring back the old Trailblazers days. So he certainly wasn't worth his extension, but he is now a free agent where he's no longer considered an expensive albatross. He should just be considered, that guy's a light him up scorer who tries hard.
Yeah, Anthony Simons actually, I've said this to you before, I think off the air, maybe on the air too. Anthony was drafted 5 years before Keyonte George. His trajectory actually kind of reminds me of Keyonte George, in a way, and we'll talk about Key later in this podcast, but in a way that might be kind of the cautionary tale a little bit, because he did get to a point, like his peak was 23, 4, and 6 counting stats. And he had some all-star chatter that year. That's when he was with Portland. Like, that's pretty similar to what Keyonte just did. Keyonte did it much more efficiently. Both of them were defensive minuses. And now Anthony Simons is probably back to his right and proper place in the basketball universe, which is a bench scoring guard who, comes off the bench with the greenest of lights. If you told me that like he would be worth a big chunk of the mid-level, it's just, again, I guess at that point, particularly if the Jazz wind up with like DeBonsa, I think they're big enough to have Anthony Simons be their big acquisition. But like, things start to feel pretty small if Simons is your big acquisition and you just drafted Darren Peterson. You have like, at that point, you really need Lauri Markkanen to play like all of his minutes at the 3. That makes sense.
Yeah, and I think when we're getting into the Anthony Simons, like if he's actually commanding like the majority of the mid-level exception, that means like the Jazz wouldn't really have the opportunity to use the remainder of the mid-level to get somebody else middle of the season in a trade or something like that. That's not super attractive to me. Like if he's really a gettable at like the $7-8 million mark of the mid-level, because like his market's just totally dried up, then I'm looking his way. And that kind of dovetails nicely with a comment I don't think we've brought up, which is as excited as you heard how excited I was at the beginning of this, like, oh, this is time to bring in a guy. I would not be surprised, and from you've told me this too, we both would not be surprised if we get to September and this mid-level exception is just not even used for signing a free agent. And I want to remind everyone that as of the recent CBA, you can trade for a player into the mid-level exception, and there's a number of players that I think we'll get to who are under that $15 million a year mark that you can trade into and use it as a trade exception. So like, if the option is Anthony Simons for $15 million or we'll see what happens later, I think I'd rather see what happens later. Who's your next guy?
I mean, really at this point, I would just go kind of rapid fire on some guys that for different reasons I like, but I'm not sure they're realistic. You guys mentioned on the pod the other night, Sandro Mamukelashvili, they call him Mamu for short, who had a really big role off the bench for Toronto this past season. I think particularly if it becomes untenable for the Jazz to retain Jusuf Nurkic, he's interesting for maybe a chunk of the mid-level. Maybe you don't go the whole thing because he's coming off a minimum contract. Javonte Green is coming off a minimum contract, but just had his best year in the league probably. He had some good years with Chicago, but he was just, like, realistically, Javonte Green was probably the 8th man on top-seeded Detroit Pistons this past year, had his best outside shooting season. I don't think – here's a guy who, like, 12 months ago, no one would have even had this guy on the radar. And now he is like beyond an advanced stats darling. He's actually like an advanced stats all-star. Colin Gillespie probably got too good too fast for him to be gettable. He's legitimately at this point probably the second most important Phoenix Sun. He's a tiny guard. The Jazz could already have a guard minute problem depending on what happens in the draft. But, Colin Gillespie is someone who he's unrestricted, even though he's coming off a minimum. He's been in the league long enough now that he's unrestricted. That I don't know. That could be interesting. And another Phoenix Suns guy that could be interesting for similar reasons is Jordan Goodwin. Jordan Goodwin has kind of been hanging around on the fringes of some rotations, and then this year finally played and did some pretty good things by advanced metrics and by efficiency metrics. So I don't know. There are just some quick reactions on guys that are probably worth talking about. But like I said, most of those guys are either not gettable for the MLE, or they're maybe not really candidates for the full MLE.
Yeah, Gillespie, I think, is one of the most interesting players of the offseason, I think. And if you haven't watched the Suns and you have no idea what Gillespie did, actually watch the Jazz overtime win against the Suns in early in the year. And we were like, I was kind of thinking, like, this is a two-way guy that I remember from here in Denver watching him, like, he's just a guy. And now he's like an actual guy. The reason he's an important player of the offseason is Phoenix, due to their stretches of Bradley Beal and I'm already forgetting the other two guys that they've stretched, and they just have all these they have all this dead money on the books. They have a significant financial crunch, and yeah, can they pay both Mark Williams and Colin Gillespie, and also add Jordan Good, perhaps bring him back? And so my concern about Gillespie is, I wonder if teams like the Bulls and the perhaps even the Hawks, if they do something with don't do anything with CJ McCollum, or the Brooklyn Nets look around and say, like, hey, actually, we're going to try 3 years, $60 million for Gillespie, right? And maybe the third year is half guarantee or something like that. And so he's actually not gettable at the mid-level, not because of anything Phoenix does, because actually one of these cap space teams looks around and says, you know what, that's a guy who we'd enjoy bringing in. A guy who I think is extremely weird, and I think he's like weird in the perfect Utah weird way. I think he would.
Is this your crazy idea?
No. I have a really crazy idea in a minute. I have been very up and down on my opinions of Matisse Thybulle over the years, and I think in this team, in this role, he would fit, and he can't fit barely anywhere. And he can shoot spot up threes now, and I think he's just got this weird affect that would be perfect for both the state of Utah and Salt Lake City, and for all the reasons that we love it. And the team, he's flawed. I don't think he would cost $50 million a year. I don't even know if he would cost $5 million a year, but I think he could at least inject necessary defensive acumen and then raise everyone's skill set as, like, here's what defense actually looks like, just a presence of defense in the locker room for a couple years. And then when he departs in a couple years, probably everyone will look around and be like, okay, like, now we have to, like, AJ DeBonce, you were a rookie this year. 2 years from now, like, that's what defense looks like. You didn't learn any of it at BYU. Yeah. Do it now. So I think he's absolutely gettable. He would have a role, would fit. A player that I'm not sure is particularly available, but really does fit that. He's been one of my least favorite players in the league forever, Dan. Do you know what my least favorite player thing in the NBA is? Like, what just drives me nuts? What causes me to tweet expletives every time I see it?
I know you hate Jalen Williams drawing charges.
Yes, I hate players who slide under players while they're in midair to draw charges.
Did I get it right on the first try?
Yes, that is my least favorite play. So whenever a guy just, like, when most of their defense is comprised of just running to a spot and standing still and pretending to fall over and drawing a charge, I think it's cute and okay, like, every once in a while. Like when Jalen Brunson does it occasionally, like, he'll be pretty strategic about it, and it's like, I can get down with that every once in a while, but not when it defines your entire defensive identity. And there's a free agent backcourt player who is on a player option who has significant connections to Danny Ainge, and that's Marcus Smart. And
yeah, I almost brought him up. Yeah.
So, well, the Lakers are in such a bizarre salary cap situation, depending on what happens with LeBron James and how much they fight with Austin Reeves' potential max new contract. Marcus Smart played so well that he is actually very likely to decline his player option, and they can bring him back on early bird rights, I think it is. They've only had him for 1 year, so it would be non-bird, but they can do more. He has a significant amount of money that he'd probably come back at 120% of his salary to the Lakers. But he does have a significant connection to Danny Ainge, and I'm not really a whole lot of other connections with the Utah roster, but as much as I hate that type of play and whatever, this team needs it, Dan. Like, this team is probably going to need not just the great defensive front court acumen of Jackson and Kessler and what they can do from a shot blocking perspective, but just gumption, energy, and the je ne sais quoi of a Marcus Smart.
they need a couple of guys who are assholes. Like, let's just say it that way, right? They just need the asshole factor could be like a little higher for the Utah Jazz going into next
Agreed.
season.
So I think Smart's gettable. Reach out to him, have Danny Ainge call him up personally. He's the one who drafted him. He clearly believes in him, and that sort of thing. All right, before we get into trade candidates, it's time for my biggest stupid idea. Or you're gonna hate this. Jazz fans are going to hate this, but I think it would be cool.
I cannot wait to hate this.
So the Sacramento Kings are going to be the luxury tax to start the year, and they are the league's worst team, and they're in the luxury tax, and they're going to have to figure out a way to get cheaper. And I'm envisioning a scenario where they go to Zach LaVine and they say, we are going to buy you out, and we want to buy you out and stretch whatever money we have to keep on our books and over however many years. And if Zach LaVine is a free agent because he's been bought out by the Sacramento Kings, is that gettable at the mid-level exception? And if so, I want in.
So if they stretched him, that would be like 16 million and change over the next 3 years. I guess they could do that. I guess that's a way they could. I don't know. I've never been a big fan. I get the feeling just with the people I talk to who work near John Stockton and Karl Malone Drive. I would guess that there are people in the Jazz front office who also aren't major fans. But I applaud the craziness of the idea. We're here for crazy ideas. You came through.
No, I'm just.
I would be.
Yeah, it's like it's the mid-level exception, and it's need ball handling, need backcourt stuff. And when I saw that the Kings were in the luxury tax, I was like, this is a problem for them. And yeah, I'm not exactly a LaVine fan day to day, watching him on the Bulls and watching him on the Kings. I think he's a miserable player. I also wonder, like, what happens if like your career's on a string here and you need to actually be on a winning outfit and see what you can do. It's stupid, and I hope it makes for. I hope everyone's listening to this be like, oh, I can't wait to subscribe to Salt City Hoops for more good ideas. Okay, so I think trades are more interesting because there's a lot of teams who are either actively trying to perhaps offload players. I think Oklahoma City is trying to offload players like Aaron Wiggins and Isaiah Joe. We'll get into perhaps those guys fit with Utah in a moment, but it's what is interesting to me about the trade idea is that even if teams are actively trying to offload money or they're not looking to do it now, these are options that can exist all the way up until the trade deadline. So there's a ton of virtue to seeing how this whole thing works, to seeing how does Cody Williams look, how does Bryce Sensabaugh look, and how does Kyle Filipowski look coming in after an offseason, and then deciding not until, like when we traded for Jordan Clarkson in December, right? Like when we can make a decision in December, January to say like, oh, we got something here, but we don't have X, and now we can look at the trade market. The problem with waiting so long is that maybe the pickings are a little bit slimmer. So let's talk about some players that you think, if we don't get on the wagon this summer on trying to bring them in the mid-level exception, we would perhaps regret waiting.
So on this one, instead of going in like descending order of interest, the way I've done this so that I don't forget guys, because I think there are a lot of names in this category that are interesting. The free agent pool is finite. I mean, by definition, the NBA player pool is finite. The free agent pool is even more finite. There are some fun names if you go from like 15 million and work your way down to 9, 8, 7 million. You could even go smaller than that, although at a certain point, it's like, at that point, why are you using the MLE at all? There are other ways to acquire a $5 million player or whatever.
You trade John Contra straight up for him.
Exactly, right. So, and then keep the MLE intact for something else. So, on this one, my thinking was, just for my own sanity, I'd kind of go top down from a salary standpoint. And the first name that sticks out to me is like, I wonder at what point Indiana would listen on Obi Toppin. He makes exactly 15 this coming season. Just had an underwhelming year, partially because of health. No one in Indiana could stay healthy for any length of time last year. That's one of the reasons that they had such a bad record, and then the lottery gods did not smile upon them anyway. They have some financial crunch coming up. They just acquired another big man. Not that Obi Toppin is like a quote unquote big man, but Obi Toppin is like a 4, and they acquired Miles Turner, who is a a 4.5, a 4.7, more
Ivica
center than power
Zubats.
forward. Oh, sorry. Yeah, they just got Ivica Zubats to fill the Miles Turner role. Sorry, my brain is conflated. So there's him. The next guy going down in order, like, and you mentioned this guy when we were talking before, like Herb Jones is probably too good to expect New Orleans to just give him away. Where I could see Herb Jones happening into the Jazz's MLE is if New Orleans is working on something bigger, which it sounds like they might be, and maybe they have a player involved where the salary matching is hard because it's a sign and trade, or there's some poison pill, which means a player that you're trading with an extension pending. There are a couple different scenarios where a player counts differently for the team trading him than he does for the team receiving him, and that makes it hard to make salaries match. And sometimes someone has to send a big salary to a third team for that deal to happen.
Real quickly on Herb Jones, just because
Please.
I think a lot of Jazz fans have kind of liked him. Whatever you think his true shooting percentage is, it's like way worse
It's
than
worse.
that.
Yep.
It's arguable whether he can even ever shoot again. Like and from all areas of the floor. Like we're talking about a non-offensive player, but can dribble a little bit and has shown flashes. Extended flash. What is an extended flash? Just a lamp uh, of actually being a productive offensive player. So it's not like you can totally write him off. He's this era's Trevor Ariza of defense first, and perhaps if he's overstretched offensively, he looks even worse. Man, we're really remembering guys today. I love it. Trevor Ariza. So Herb Jones, one of my, perhaps this is an ulterior motive, and I said this on the podcast with your brother, Mr. Ken Clayton, is if there's ever a chance to be on the phone with New Orleans Pelicans management, I want to be on the phone with them. Because, maybe like they're looking at Herb Jones as this requires a medium to bad first round pick. But if it's part of something larger where we can steal something else from them because they're not valuing some sort of other asset appropriately, I want to be on the phone with them as much as possible for any reason. I think he's just a wing defender. You'd be on an expiring contract next year. So I think he would fit in, solve some defensive issues in the short term, and we'll see what happens after that.
He had one good shooting year. His third season, he actually scraped together a 40% shooting year from three. And at that point in time, he looked untouchable. Like at that point in time, Pelicans people talked about him like, good luck, a guy who's this good defensively and is now shooting 40% from three. But then he's gone straight back into like, Denzel Valentine territory where like, man, you're really good at some things, but Jesus Christ, we cannot put you in an offense. You know what I mean? Does that count as remembering a guy?
Oh, that's absolutely remembering a Jazz guy. Woo.
Denzel Valentine was a Jazz guy? Oh yeah, he was here for a minute.
He had a 10-day.
Yeah. The COVID season. I've got help. You just mentioned Ken. Ken is my spotter for this podcast. He just sat down next to me. He's visiting this weekend, so
he can confirm our 10-day contracts for Denzel Valentine.
He did. He filled me in. Going down the list, like not super interested in Dennis Schroeder. Karis LeVert was good once upon a time. He had literally a 0 EPM wins season, which means for all those minutes in Detroit, he basically contributed nothing to the bottom line of winning. You mentioned Bobby Portis earlier as someone that would be kind of conditional. Are you interested in Bobby Portis as a MLE trade target?
I love the idea of Bobby Portis, similar to I have a little bit more faith in the Milwaukee front office than the New Orleans front office, but I think as they're trying to unwind the Giannis situation, if they ultimately are also like, yeah, it's time for Bobby Portis to find a new home. I've been lower on Bobby Portis than many others. Hubie Brown loves Bobby Portis, and I'm never going to be to Hubie Brown levels. But if we don't, that's as I mentioned before, if we don't draft Cam Boozer, then there's front court minutes depending on what Kyle Filipowski can do, and he's that kind of tough guy attitude, and I think he was overextended in Milwaukee. He was never as good as his minutes warranted in Milwaukee. If you're asking him to simply play 15, 16 minutes a night, and in specific roles, he can play center a little bit. He rebounds better. He can play next to Jaren Jackson and solve some of the rebounding stuff. So I wouldn't hate having him. I wouldn't want to just take on his $14.5 million and pay an asset to do it. I would want to just be like, we'll take him.
Yeah, that's almost one where it's like, if you need to get rid of him, we'll take him on for a second or something like that. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is too good. I'm not super interested in Grant Williams. Corey Kispert is on a really value contract, but he had a bad year. There was a point in time when Corey Kispert looked like he was going to be a high-level rotation player for playoff teams. I'm not sure he looks that way anymore. I'm skipping over guys on rookie scale contracts because those guys usually aren't going to get traded in just like a straight up salary move. Man, Dorian Finney-Smith just gave Houston nothing last year. On paper, he does a lot of the things that the Jazz need in terms of wing defense and like a requisite amount of like not passing and creation necessarily, but just like connectorness on offense. It's just at this point, I don't think I'd touch it because he literally was a negative value player last year by advanced metrics.
And as a concept, there's a lot of talk that he was coming off an ankle surgery, I think it was. So like, has he lost it? The main drag on Finney-Smith for me is that his contract goes out to 2029, and like that just if we're gonna do that, like you're really gonna have to pay us assets to do it. Can I jump in with another idea?
Yeah.
This is I think he's overpaid, but I think the extension was kind of made everyone raise their eyebrows a little bit. But I just mentioned if Milwaukee's really trying to unwind the Giannis situation, they kind of look around with a new coach and what he wants and what players he values, I think AJ Green fits great with Utah.
Absolutely on my list.
I still think people just don't know who he is. And we're talking about he will go entire games where he will go several games in a row where he only shoots 3-point field goals. He's a defensive problem as for opposing offense. He actually is a gamer defensively. He has limitations because he's just kind of a slow white guy out there, but like he gets unfairly targeted, I think, in certain situations. He actually holds up in pick and roll defense just fine. Not as tiny as you would think, and he's a bomber. He is an absolute bomber. I think he'd be interesting. Let's talk about the OKC guys, because I want to know, are you giving up an asset to get Isaiah Joe or Aaron Wiggins, or are you, because I think other teams would, so I don't think we're in this one-on-one negotiation with Sam Presti, but would you want to get into a tiny bidding war for either one of them, or are you fine just saying, we don't have to give up an asset for a player that quality?
I think Isaiah Joe, I absolutely would. Which is funny to say because Aaron Wiggins might actually check more of the Jazz's boxes. Aaron Wiggins is closer to like an actual guard, and he's also better defensively than Joe. But man, Joe is just same as AJ Green. I mean, you're right. AJ Green and Isaiah Joe are the type of shooters. They're like a Kyle Korver or a Luke Kennard that like they check into the game and defenses have to know where they're at every second, and that just makes things easier for everybody else. So I have long had a basketball crush on Isaiah Joe. And yeah, I think you're right. I think everybody in the NBA can see the financial situation staring down the OKC Thunder, and everyone knows that they have to lose some guys at the end of their rotation. Those two guys were not in the playoff rotation for the most part. I mean, they saw random minutes, but they did not play when the games mattered the most, and yet they're making 8 figures. So at some point, in fact, let's just see what it is. It's Isaiah Joe is here we go, 11.3 next year, followed by a team option, and Aaron Wiggins is a little bit less than that. There he is, 9.2, followed by a descending year, followed by a team option. So I don't think you get them. without either adding an asset, or maybe you see if OKC is interested in any of the Jazz's sort of cheaper project guys. Um, someone is going to give a couple of seconds to get Isaiah Joe, I think.
Yeah, and I would do a couple seconds, I think, and also I think it depends actually a little bit on which seconds we're talking about. But if that's all it took, I think that brings the Jazz offense from, hey, this looks like a top 10 unit to, hey, the Jazz in the regular season are a top 4 unit because they're just constantly just bombarding you with that sort of quality shooting. And because Joe is better defensively than, like, it's funny, like Aaron Wiggins kind of struggled a little bit defensively at times, and Isaiah Joe can hold up, and that's why he makes $2 million more. A guy who I think is, if you think DeAnthony Melton is a budget version of something, well, this guy is a budget version of DeAnthony Melton, and it's Ty Jerome. And I think Memphis is looking to perhaps not super compete next year, but I think they also liked Ty Jerome, and they liked kind of putting him on a minutes limit and that sort of thing. And if they're getting Zach Edey back, they're going to get a great quality number 3 pick. John Morant's not really going to go anywhere this summer, so like he's going to be in the fold. He's ostensibly at least a net neutral or slightly winning player, but if Ty Jerome is available for a couple seconds, I'm really trying to get in on that.
I would love for that to be feasible. That guy is coming off a 20.6 assist season. I think he was probably just a little too. And by the way, I think those numbers are fake. I think those numbers are what they are because he was on the Memphis Grizzlies, who were like a revolving door of injuries and trades and whatever. But I think he was probably a little bit too electric this past season for them to just say, sure, give us seconds. But I absolutely love him, and I think his stock, like, that's just the opposite of buying low. His stock is at an all-time high right now. I like so Najee Marshall had a really good year for Dallas, by advanced stats, by defense. He's cheap. He's under 10 million. He's under 9.5 million actually. Again, a bigger wing defender type, but that's an archetype the Jazz are still light on. They've got offensive wings. They've got Lauri Markkanen-sized wings. They don't have a lot of those guys who are just like, 6'7", 6'8", and plus defenders. There was another guy like that I scrolled past to get down to. Oh, here's one for you. Royce O'Neal. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to bring up Royce O'Neal, although, he fits in this exercise salary-wise. Sam Hauser is one of those guys.
You stole my guy.
Who, like, everyone thinks Sam Hauser is a 3-point specialist. The guy actually is a plus defender. He is a positive defender. He is a good basketball player. He just also happens to shoot well. So everyone kind of assigns him all the same strengths and weaknesses that people attribute to Kyle Korver or to AJ Green or to Jason Capono or whoever the hell else. Like, he is not just a shooter. He happens to be a good shooter, but Sam Hauser is a winning basketball player and is set to make 10, 11, and then 12. Actually rounded, it's more like 11, 12, and then 12 and a half. But, I think obviously Boston is a smart team. They're a well-run team. They know what they have in Sam Hauser, but they're also up against a financial crunch. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if they have to let go of some people in that sort of Sam Hauser tier to just make their finances work.
And if the Celtics trade for Giannis, they can do it cleanly with Jaylen Brown and make that work. But if you're bringing in Giannis, it really does make you want to re-examine, every damn other person on the roster. So they could want to reconfigure something where Sam Hauser is being sent out. The reason he doesn't end up in Utah, Dan, and we can close on the free agent thoughts with this unless you had another guy. But the reason he won't end up in Utah is because the Hauser family is extremely upset with Utah because his older brother Joey was signed to a training camp deal and was waived shortly thereafter. And so there's some bad blood between the Hausers and the Utah Jazz. I'm entirely kidding. But Austin Ainge probably has a much better relationship with Sam Hauser than Joey.
You got to be careful who you piss off in this business. It's a small universe.
I got
Um,
nobody. I'm sure there's infinite amount of guys we can talk about. Obviously we're looking at backcourt wing help and maybe a forward or center type if the Nurkic, Kessler, Cambuser, like things around those players work out differently. Perhaps there could be some front court guys. I mentioned with Ken, the idea of Robert Williams as like the D'Anthony Melton of big men. Like, can you keep him on ice? Is he whatever? And I don't know. I think our assets are better spent somewhere else. So I think it's important to use. I will be furious, Dan, if we are in April and haven't used the mid-level exception for something substantive. But I won't be too mad if we're sitting there in September, October, and haven't used it yet. But by September, October, we should know something about one Keyonte George.
right, which is the other topic we wanted to just briefly touch on tonight. Keyonte George is eligible to negotiate and agree to an extension as early as the evening of June 30th. The noise from Tim McMahon of ESPN is that as of right now, that extension is sounding unlikely. And I actually, to be totally honest with you, Mark, we haven't talked a lot about this one. I think you and I think our present day and medium term valuations of Keyonte George are one of the areas where you and I differ a little bit. So I haven't talked much with you about this off the air. I was actually pretty heartened by that McMahon report because I have said all along to you, to Ken, to others that like if it's going to cost 40 million to retain Keyonte George, to extend Keyonte George, because he just had this season where he had stats you could credibly call borderline all-star stats. He didn't really sniff the all-star game. He wasn't close to making all-star, but he had those kind of stats. As I mentioned earlier in this podcast, Anthony Simons at a particular point in time had those type of stats. Jalen Green had those type of stats. A lot of sort of these tweener guards, offense only, whatever, have had years where they did, 22, 4, and 6, and then eventually went back to just being like nice bench scoring guards and whatever. If it's going to take 35, 40 million, even if it takes 30 million to lock up Keyonte George on an extension, I think the most responsible thing the Jazz can do before they sign that is spend more time finding out if he's really on a star trajectory or if the year he just had was the version of Anthony Simons 2021, 2022, where he had that 24, 4, and 6 or whatever. So I'm actually not hurt at all by the fact that an extension might not get done. And that does mean that the Jazz may be trending towards a similarly uncomfortable restricted free agency dialogue with Keyonte George next summer as to what they're going through right now with Kessler. But I think that's more responsible than going, ooh, that was a shiny object. That was a nice year. And really, when we say nice year, like, let's remember, Keyonte George only played half the season. So we're talking about like 3 really good months of basketball. I am totally comfortable with the Jazz seeing if he can build on that before they write that type of paycheck.
Where you and I differ the most in pretty stark ways, I think, is where we see Keyonte George's future as what is his actual quality and what does he mean to the Utah Jazz. I think that's where we differ. But I want to put a pin in that to note that I tend to be a little bit too cold and calculated about this sort of these negotiations. And again, I don't want to just be like, I'm a corporate attorney, this is how I always think. But like when it comes to restricted free agency and extensions, I can't help but take the human element out of it, take the player quality element out of it, and just look at the market and just say like, all right, how do we craft a team under these strict rules, not about like luxury tax and first apron roster restrictions. I really don't think are too bad. Second apron roster restrictions are really bad. You got to think about those. I think, like I've long said, I don't care about Ryan Smith's pocketbook, and until Ryan Smith puts me on his payroll to clean the dishes or whatever, I don't care about Ryan Smith and the luxury tax. But what I do care about is the rules about how to build your team. And I think in this double apron era where you have to be very cognizant of flying up into the second apron, and especially with the contracts that we have on the team right now, I'm sorry, I just get freezer refrigerator cold about you have to leverage the tools that you have and trust that your management, your coaches, the other players that you've brought in, your Kevin Love filling up the 15th roster spot is good enough to paper over some of the fact that, like, yeah, maybe Keyonte George hates Austin Ainge at the end of the day, but he likes Ryan Smith, or he likes what he earnestly will come back after a tense negotiation, walk in a locker room with Walker Kessler and Lauri Markkanen, and he's really close with Jaren Jackson Jr. like right now, and like that, and then the team starts winning and it papers it over. So yeah, I think that the Jazz are very, very, very smart, and I know some Jazz a lot of fans of all teams are very frustrated when like that everything isn't all happy and go lucky and we come to like nice fun extensions and we just come to the table and meet in the middle. You think you're worth this, I think you're worth this, and we come in the middle and it's all happy. That's not how this is ever going to work. And so I am also heartened because that means that the Jazz are wielding roster construction advantages properly, and they're saying, look, this is what we're going to be constrained financially. So this is a deal that is probably below what you would get as an unrestricted free agent. It's below market, but we know that you don't really have any other options, and that saves the team money so that we can do some other things. I don't think they're going to be dumb enough to pull Jalen Brunson did it, so why don't you? Because I think that's also inaccurate. I get really upset when people bring up the Jalen Brunson example, because Jalen Brunson he signed a max extension, by the way, so we can't just be like, oh, Jalen Brunson just willingly took money. He took a max extension. So let's set that aside. But I do think this will be interesting come restricted free agency. This is the last thing I'll say before I shut up and let you respond. I do not care about Walker Kessler's free agency this summer as far as like what teams are out there, because I don't care about the Chicago Bulls offering something in free agent. I don't care. I think the Nets are going to have to do some painful surgery to get rid of Nick Claxton if they bring in Walker. I'm not worried about the Nets, and we just match whatever contract they'd offer anyway. I don't care. Next summer, there actually could be some teams that could inflict some pain on Utah for Keyonte George. And so I don't think the Jazz are going to come to any sort of agreement now in these summer months. But I do think that with, as Andrew Brandt always says, Villanova Law, head of the sports department over there, as he always says, deadline spur action, right? And so when we get to September, October, the two sides are looking at each other and they can say, look, Keyonte, you not only is your progression, they wouldn't literally say this, but this is what I'm thinking. Not only is last year perhaps just one good year, one half of good year, but you see how many mouths are we going to have to feed this year? How good are your numbers really going to look this year? You might be really efficient. You might actually improve as a quality basketball player. But do you think a max contract is waiting for you if you average 17 points with all the mouths to feed? How about you take $34 million and we'll do 4 years. And you can get back on the market in the 5th year if you want to. There's ways to do this where he doesn't have to just be like, oh, just max me. I think there's some security that he'd be wise to take.
And I guess my point is, even at $34 million, like that's a lot of money for someone who might be like, if the Jazz are actually contenders during Keyonte George's second contract, meaning, in the next 2 to 6 years, what in that construct, Keyonte George is their blank best player. That's a rhetorical question, but I think if they're contending in the next few years, it means that Lauri Markkanen and Jaren Jackson Jr. are still very good basketball players. It probably means that one of Ace Bailey and this year's pick has really popped. So I think you're probably looking at Keyonte George being like your fifth best player if you're contending in the next few years. Maybe your fourth.
The reason I haven't pushed back on you in writing yet because it's kind of hard to write out this thought, but the way that the Jazz are structured, and even if Ace Bailey really pops soon, or if Darren Peterson really pops soon, Lowry Market and Jaren Jackson, they're max players, sure, but like they're nice. They're nice. They're fringy all-star types. And so this team, if it's going to be championship quality, is going to be, we're going to build it in the aggregate. And so when you say like Keyonte George is our fifth best player, Dan, I'm actually thinking like, well, we need that quality of fifth best player.
Sure.
We can't just
Sure.
have a guy. Like a solid role player is our fifth best player. We actually will need 5 FU starters because our best players are not top 10 players. Maybe Darren Peterson gets there. Maybe Ace Bailey gets there. But over the next 2 to 3 years, I don't think any one of them is going to become a surefire, oh my God, all NBA player. I think, though, that we're 4 or 5 years out from that for Ace Bailey and Darren Peterson. So in this championship window, in this playoff contention window, I think you need someone that expensive and that good as your fifth best player.
So here's my cautionary tale. Because you mentioned the market. So I have gone and looked at kind of, and every offseason is its own kind of macro or micro world. But just to get a feel for how things have been progressing for guards in the extension market, I went back and looked at the last 4 years of draft classes to see which guards got extensions and which ones didn't. Obviously, there are the max guys: Cade Cunningham, Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton, Tyrese Maxey. LaMelo Ball, probably a borderline max case, but he got it. And Desmond Bane got a max extension, even though he doesn't have any All-Star appearances. But those are the 6 max guys. Let's put them off to the side because I don't think anyone is arguing. At least we are not arguing for a Keyonte George max extension. The other guys who have gotten extensions as guards, they're like the outliers on the low end, like Peyton Pritchard and Moses Moody. Moses Moody is really more of a 2. So, but then there's like, you've got a bunch of guys in the 20 to 30 range: Shaedon Sharpe, Christian Brown, Dyson Daniels, Devin Vassell, Jalen Suggs. Then you've got these 2 guys that just are right in between those 2 camps. And I think that they're the cautionary tales. And this is what I worry about. This is where I worry the Jazz might wind up. Jalen Green was the number 2 pick in the draft, got a $35 million average annual value on his extension. He was drafted 2 years before Keyonte George. So again, market was a little different, whatever. But 2 years earlier, Jalen Green got an extension with a $35 million average annual value. He was coming off a season with 25 and 4, 20 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. Emmanuel Quickley, 25th pick in the 2020 draft, got an extension at 32.5 annual value. Those today are 2 bad contracts. Those are contracts that no one in the NBA is taking on without serious assets being attached to them. And I'm just worried about, giving a player a number when he's at his absolute peak value, and then realizing that, to your point, like Keyonte might be a really, really good, really important 17-point per game player for the Jazz this season. That might be what he is going forward. And that's okay, because to your point, the Jazz need that. I'm just not sure you can pay $35 million for that.
I agree, and I don't think I would go up to 35 on extension. I mentioned like 34 as like what I think they might get a deal done as at 34 million average annual value, which I think would include max raises, and I think so you'd start a little bit lower. I wouldn't love it. I think they could if you get all the way to restricted free agency though. I think you're risking that this becomes way worse. And that's why I think that like a little bit of pain is okay. My difference with the guys you mentioned in Keyonte George, and this is just from being a basketball sicko, watching the NBA, I'm watching the Houston Rockets when they're winning 3 games, and I'm sure, Coach Silas was a big part of this, but just watching Jalen Green and constantly thinking, this guy sucks. I can't stand watching him. And and he's going to get this big because he had all this potential. Like he would flash and flash and flash, and you could say like, all right, look, he's going to get this big old extension, and for what he can do, and just not buying it. And I know I'm a Jazz fan, and we love our guys, we love drafting our guys. I saw a player in Keyonte George, like a real I'm here to win player. And he's about the right stuff after 2 years of hearing, oh, he's not about the right stuff. And like this entire year has been about, oh my God, he's about the more right stuff that you can get. He's seeing therapists, right? And like any young man that's seeing a therapist, I'm think is up for due for greatness, right? It's just like he talks openly about these things, and I think he's been challenged in a way to say like he doesn't become an all-star, but he's a player that says he's worth the money you give him, and I don't think he has that Jalen Green type of floor where it's like, oh my God, or Christian Brown or something like that, where it's like we gave
The
him that
bottom
money
fell
and he's
out.
awful and he's bad and he's still bad. I think his floor I've seen enough from him to know like his floor is starting ball handler. I really, really, really believe in that. Could become a Simon situation, and I think it's worth a risk taking at around $32 to $34 million a year. And if he doesn't want to go for it and go to restricted free agency in the summer, yeah, I'm confident that the Jazz are gonna wield being comfortable being uncomfortable. I think I said that correctly. I'm just like they're okay with that restricted free agency concept, and we will match a max offer. It won't be and unlike the Gordon, I want to always bring back Gordon Hayward when we talk about restricted free agency, especially with Walker Kessler. I don't think I was clear about this the other day. Gordon Hayward's stature in the organization when he signed his offer sheet and then we matched that offer sheet, he was thought of as the alpha dog in the organization. He was the most important player of the organization. So it was very discordant to tell him like, go get your offer sheet and we'll match it. There was some discordant tension there. And then 4 years later, we didn't do any preparatory work to say like, should we trade him before his contract expires? We just went into his unrestricted free agency year just hoping. And I think teams, and especially our management group right now, is going to be way, way, way smarter about Walker Kessler and Keyonte George, who will not be the most important player of the organization in 4 years, not even close. Walker Kessler will be the sixth most important player in our organization in 4 years. So that if there's still some discordance and weirdness about, oh, how restricted free agency went, 3 years from now, we'll make an asset plus trade for you. If we have a struggling Keyonte George restricted free agency and he gets real sour and he turns into Jalen Green and we have to pay up a first or something to get rid of him, well, he's matching salary. We'll just replace you with some other good thing. It's not going to set the franchise back emotionally the way that losing Hayward did, and luckily we got Donovan Mitchell immediately thereafter, so we kind of forgot about it. But like, we're not gonna do to ourselves what we did with Gordon Hayward. We're much smarter group and much different players. So yeah, bring on restricted free agency if it needs to, but I'm a little bit more willing to go to take some pain to get Keyonte George locked in. I love him.
Yeah, and listen, lest I sound like a hater or a doubter or a whatever. I have written and I will continue to say there are 8 modern guards who have had a season with 20 points per game and 60% true shooting by the end of their third season. Those players are Reggie, All-Star, Penny, All-Star, Kevin Martin, a really good proven scorer, was in the league for a long time, SGA, All-Star, MVP, Desmond Bane, we'll see if he makes some All-Star teams. Halliburton, All-Star, would have been Finals MVP last year if things had gone a little differently. Tyrese Maxey, All-Star, and Keyonte George. Keyonte George, the season he just had, it's why it's a little unfair for me to hang the Anthony Simons comp on him or the Shaden Sharp comp or the, pick your guy. I keep talking about some of these like mid-efficiency score-first guards that have had, seasons with 20 plus points and 6 assists and whatever. The thing that Keyonte did last year that Anthony Simons didn't do was do that with the level of efficiency that he had. So I'm a believer. I just want to see it for more than 3 months before they write that check. So I am fine I am fine with seeing, even just see how the summer goes. These guys are going to get in a gym together in like September after the draft. And I think that, not to you and me, because we don't get to be in that gym, but to Jazz people, it's going to become pretty apparent pretty fast if like the Jazz still need Keyonte George to be the grown up in the room, or if like Darren Peterson or whoever they draft is like ready to kind of be the guy and have the ball in his hands a lot. And even that could change the thinking on like, hey, before we thought we might need to give you 32, but now maybe it's, again, going back to my comps, like I agree with you on so much of what you just said, but for all those reasons, like I think Jalen Suggs, I think Dyson Daniels, reigning MIP Dyson Daniels, or sorry, 1 year ago MIP, reigning as Nickeil Alexander-Walker, former Jazz man. Shaedon Sharpe, those guys I think have safe floors too. And if we were talking about an extension in the range that those guys got, I'm just worried about paying him as though he belongs in that top group, and then it turns out that he's, the fifth or sixth best player on a title run. But like I said, special season. Really changed things, not just statistically, but mentally and leadership wise. And yet still manages to like be the right amount of goofy.
The last thing I'll say on it is like there was obvious transactional reasons why the Kessler extension didn't get done last summer. Like it was obvious why, like for salary cap reasons, it just wasn't going to happen. It was bizarre that he felt so hurt by it, but like, I'm sorry, man, like there wasn't any way that was ever going to get done unless you took a massive haircut. Keyonte George, I wonder about like his own motivations though, because you could go into a season and say like one injury and that's 9 figures gone. And are you really going to turn down $140 million that's there? It's there. All you got to do is just sign it, right? And yeah, he was a first round pick and he's made a healthy bunch of money, but like it's not FU money. It's not like he's still got to watch the checkbook a little bit, to have a nice life for your entire life. You got like that may not last you forever if you're just a tiny bit irresponsible. Like if you want like I'm set money, it's right there. And I wonder about the guys who turn down the extensions that are just like, well, you can get I don't know, like $45 million more over the course of an entire contract if you just wait 9 months and go through an entire gauntlet of an NBA season. I don't, if he's probably sitting there right now, his agency's probably sitting there right now saying, max me. Okay, like, I understand that's your position, and here's our position, and the conversation will be, we'll do this again in September. I think I just want to. I want this to be part of the off-season preview. So I was like, let's talk about it now and go from there. But right now, it's we got the draft coming up. I don't think who we draft affects who we sign or trade for in the mid-level exception. But the next time you hear from us, it'll be we're gonna have a future Hall of Fame statue player that we are going to have to build for whoever he drafted number 2, right, Dan? Who is your who? Do you have a top 2?
No. Okay, here's the thing. I was literally just about to ask you that question because I don't think I've ever heard you say on the record if you have a board as it relates to the top 3. I have mine.
Okay.
Who's going first here?
Okay, I'll go first just because when I did my solo draft stuff, I said like, look, it's for me, AJ is in a tier by himself. He still is in a tier by himself for me. I think he's different. He's different than the other guys, and I think his floor is way higher. Before I had Darren Peterson in a tier by himself, and now and it went Boozer then Caleb Wilson, and now I'm very excited to announce to the world that like I feel very weird. I now have Darren Peterson and Cam Boozer and Caleb Wilson all in a tier together. I have downgraded Darren Peterson, and he is my 4th rated prospect. I think after I've rewatched all these college games, like I'm such a sicko about this. I'm like, I really want to get this right. And watching the difference between high school and college for Darren Peterson, and I'm seeing this tentativeness, I'm seeing this lack of shake, I'm seeing this inability sometimes to actually get to the rim and really lose guys. He's pushing buttons on a controller and doing dribble moves, but not actually losing guys. and I'm wondering, like, is there something mentally, physically, pseudoscience wrong of Darren Peterson that this is actually the floor is just going to fall completely out? So if we draft, I think he's could be a Hall of Famer, and I'm really excited if we draft him. If we draft Boozer, I'm going to feel safe and comfy, and if we draft Darren Peterson, I'm going to wonder, like, is this going to screw up?
Okay, well then you're going to be disappointed with my top 3 board, because Darren Peterson remains my number 1 guy. I tend to look, the last time the Jazz picked this high in the draft, I was 5 months old. So this opportunity comes around so infrequently that I think you have to draft for ceiling as opposed to drafting out of fear for the floor. I think if everything goes right for Darren Peterson, he's like, I almost don't even want to give comps because they're like so sacrilegious. My board goes Darren Peterson, AJ, then Boozer. I think though that where some of the Boozer love is real is I think if Darren Peterson goes off the board first, I do not know what the Jazz will do. I think it's a real tough call between AJ and Cam for the Jazz. I mean, I would take AJ. I think it's feeling like the Jazz have Peterson number 1, and like there's still a coin toss about what will happen if Peterson is off the board.
I think Boozer is way underrated defensively. He will never block a shot. He should never play center unless in like weird situations. But I think he will be absolutely dominant as a 4 in way. Like, I think he's Kevin Love. I think he's just absolutely peak Kevin Love. It's so obvious to me that is the player he's going to be, and I don't see a floor like beneath that. I think this is an all-star. I think this is a potential Hall of Famer if he gets enough usage out of it. And I'm high on Boozer, but Darren Peterson has a sky-high ceiling. And with Darren Peterson, with Peterson and Boozer, the skills that are going to translate in the NBA. You know that Peterson's going to shoot, and that's going to translate. He's going to be a fabulous shooter. And you know that Boozer's going to do a lot of big man cool things. And he's going to have passing, shooting, rebound. He's going to do those things. At what level, I don't know, but he's got those skills that'll translate. AJ could have no skills that translate. Like, he could end up in a situation where he's all his great moves that worked in college and his first steps and his very lab developed skills are not NBA ready and just never NBA ready. But I just the way he moves on a court is just tantalizing to me. So I love AJ, and I just got scared with Darren watching him get stonewalled sometimes and playing off the ball. And I know Kansas was weird and he was weird, and I'm feeling more squirrely as we get closer. That's all. Not about the player's talent, just squirrely.
Have I ever told you my floor comp for Boozer?
What's the floor comp for?
I mean, you'll kind of be upset that this is my floor comp for him, but this is actually kind of a compliment and speaks to the fact that like the reasons he's a no-brainer. Because my floor comp for him was like a 16-year pro. Okay, I think that Cam Boozer, if he doesn't pan out in all the ways that people think he could pan out at the top end of his range, he's still going to be in the league for a really long time as like a smart playmaking 4. A connector guy who's not necessarily a lockdown defender, but he's a good team defender. This guy I'm thinking of helped multiple deep playoff teams. He contributed to at least one championship. I think he has a couple championships as like a better than a role player, but never like a top 3, top 4 guy on a title team. Do you have any guesses? He won 2 championships.
Boris Diaw?
My spotter over here knows who I'm talking about. I think there's a chance. I mean, I don't think this is likely, but we're talking about a bell curve, right? Meaning like what happens at this end of the trajectory is about as likely as him becoming Tim Duncan. What if he has a Shane Battier career?
Perfect.
Super smart guy,
perfect.
Helped winning player for 16, 17 years. How many years? My spotter stopped spotting. 13 years. Okay, I was giving him too many credit. So anyway, that's that's neither here nor there. Look at this. Our listeners got some bonus draft talk. We weren't even planning on doing this tonight, but how could we not sit here and talk about these 3 or 4? I'm by the way, and I know like our friend Justin Sweeney will be mad at this. Like I've never thought of Caleb Wilson as being in the same echelon as these other 3. I think he's going to be an amazing pro. I think there's close to 0 chance he'll ever be the best player on a conference finals team. And I think all 3 of those other guys have as their best case scenario, best player on a conference finals team. And so for me, it's those 3. That's my order as of today. DP, AJ, Booz. I have a pretty wide canyon after that before Caleb Wilson, and a pretty wide canyon before everyone else.
I just really believe in Caleb Wilson with the ball in his hands. I think there's watching it over and over and over again. I'm like, this is not right away, but this is a player that, I can't wait to get him on a second contract for way cheaper than the player he's going to become. And
yeah.
And I'm probably over-indexing on my fear for Darren Peterson because, yeah, the ceilings between the 2 players are just not comparable at all. And I'm the bust level is growing for me. And I think I need to watch more of his high school tape to get excited again.
Yeah. Well, look at that. Like I said, we added some draft talk. Hey, breaking news, everybody. Dan and Mark went really long on a podcast and talked about things they didn't have budgeted to talk about. That's what happens when we get together and talk about hoops and talk about the Utah Jazz. Any parting thoughts, Mark?
No, it's before free agency officially kicks off. I wanted to talk about this earlier than later to give people really a full week to digest it. But hopefully right before free agency, I'd love to have you or Ken or Mo, both or anybody else on for a show of like only dumb ideas only. And so maybe we have, because we tend to be really practical, and I think that's what Jazz fans are listening to us specifically for. I think a little segment on our dumbest ideas and trades that we don't think are possible, but like we concocted 1 or 2 is just like, because the offseason's weird. And the Angels are on the phone with people that you don't know that they're on the phone with. So I've said it like 1,000 times. The Angels it's so refreshing to know that we're just on the phone all the time and like anything could happen. So the mid-level exception is a thing, but maybe we can have some weird things and maybe we can predict some of it. So thanks for joining me on this one. I've had a blast.
Yeah. Well, thanks again. There's something you keep saying on all these podcasts, which is that, off season is really where our friends get their money's worth, facetiously speaking, because we charge $0 for this content. But out of Salt City Hoops, we really take pride in getting things right in the off season and knowing our stuff when it comes to the mechanics of all this work and trying to educate people, but at the same time have fun and imagine the possibilities and the good ideas and the dumb ideas and everything in between. So we'll have a lot more coming at you. And that's Mark Pereira over there. I'm Dan Clayton. This has been a Salt City Hoops podcast.